Welcome to KCBC. This will be episode 89. So grateful to continue to be able to do this show and have awesome guests on like Dylan Peterson from Fort Osage School District. Dylan and I, real quick story. Dylan reached out to me on LinkedIn and asked if I would be willing to come and speak to a group of students at Fort Osage High School to talk about podcasting and all that. And I thought it was so interesting. And I was like, absolutely, I'd love to do it. And so I cataloged that experience in episode 81. I encourage everybody to go back and listen to that after you've checked this episode out. And all that said, Dylan, before I get in and let you introduce yourself, I want to give a shout out to Preston, Brady, Logan, and Ruth. They all connected with KCBC after I visited, and they have been so awesome. And I've tried to congratulate all of them as they've graduated and follow what they're doing because I really appreciated that. So without further ado, Dylan, welcome to the show again.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you. It was great to meet you that first time. So this is awesome.
Absolutely. So I think it's important before we kind of dive into what you're doing with Fort Osage School District, the awesome little nuggets that you've learned along the way of working with students and teaching them this beautiful art of podcasting, assigning them projects, working with their teachers. Like, I think it's really important for everybody to hear a little bit about your background, how this role came to be at Fort Osage School District, which, by the way, everybody, it's in Jackson County, Missouri. That is where the school district is located. But Dylan, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the role, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So this is a really unique role to education. It was started out of a grant by the Kauffman Foundation 7 or 8 years ago. So I'm going on to year 8. The goal was to find ways to prepare students for life after high school because a diploma just isn't cutting it. There's more that's got to be attached to it because our kids weren't ready for the workforce, ready for like the rigor of college. Especially coming out of the pandemic, a lot of students' ability to manage struggle has changed. So for the first year, I was hired on at Fort Osage, which is where I graduated, to try and figure out what we could do to enhance our programming, what we could add. And over the last 7 years, I've gotten the opportunity to just continue to add really, really cool opportunities. So this podcast project that I reached out to Michael to, I have talked to a lot of the small business owners in Independence where a school district is at. And for some reason, having producing and creating a podcast episode on a student's resume makes them stand out and makes them look more hireable. My theory is it talks a lot about their communication, constructing an argument, research, and some of the little technology tidbits. And so this was something that we wanted to bring to Fort so that they could have something awesome on their resume. And we're a really unique rural area. If you just Google Earth, our school district, we are surrounded by farms. And in fact, we bought a 70-acre farm to continue to teach students. Yeah, we're going to get goats this summer so that our ag students, yes, the goal is goats and a pumpkin patch for our elementary students.
That's incredible.
Yeah. But we're a super interesting district. We straddle 2 different population centers. So we've got a rural town, Buckner, Sibley, Levacy, that's 4,000 people total. And then we take the east side of Independence. There's a large Section 8 housing development. So it's super unique. So the really cool thing about this project is that students kind of got to talk about whatever. We kind of took the lens of this is America's 250th anniversary. So what are some things that you see about our country that are good? What do you want to see improved, especially as young people coming into the world? What do you want to see the world become? And those episodes are out on our school district channel.
Absolutely. And I made sure that I tagged the school district channel. I think all of the different programs on that channel, I think it was Wednesdays with Wilson, the Fort O update. Is it the Friday update? What?
Yes.
Or Tomahawk Talk, I think it is.
Yeah, we've got lots of different things.
My gosh, you're teaching these students how to not only deliver information, but how to
Mhm,
package it, how to spread it, how to market it. I've said it numerous times on this podcast before, but by starting a podcast, you have to sit there with yourself and hear the
mhm,
things you say that you cringe on. And
mhm,
those are the moments that you grow. And so there is so much that's happening. I know a lot of people that don't know about this form of media. They think it's just a proud personality and a microphone, but it is so much more.
mhm,
And the Tomahawk Talk, like I loved the weather updates, what
mhm,
was going on with sports, what was going on with the different programs, and this role, how you have basically gone into this role, made it something unique. I don't think we said your title, but it's going to be in the show notes. You're a business and community coordinator.
mhm,
So bringing the two together, making it one, it's so fascinating. And I just in the Q&A, I know like we didn't have much time for Q&A with the students, but like hearing about the different projects, some got to pick political topics, right? Some were
mhm,
doing the America's 250th. We had a couple of folks who approached me afterward were saying we want to do a sports podcast, and
mhm,
they were talking about some of the popular sports podcasts like Barstool Sports and how theirs would be different and angles they wanted to take. And so they were taking what they were passionate about, what they were enthusiastic about, and using the podcast as a vehicle to explore that topic and invite everybody into it. But
mhm,
um, all that to say, too, the engagement, obviously, they're learning how to use tags, hashtags, how to create titles, all of those things that podcasters eventually start paying people to do. They're getting to do that in high school. And that is
mhm,
just incredible,
mhm,
incredible. And so obviously, like one of the battle cries that I came out of that experience with was basically school districts, if you're not doing something like this, like get in touch with Dylan and Fort Osage to learn how. We need to see this. We need to see this everywhere. And I'm sure, too, that we've seen other school districts across the country kind of adopt this model. But I think it's really important, too, to discuss what it was like for you in the beginning with building that trust and finding the value and making sure that you're good at, expressing that value to people. What was that phase like when you were starting this role off and starting? How'd you find this program too, by the way? Was it initially like just we're going to do this podcasting thing, or were there other things you tried? What was that journey like?
yeah. Our real world learning initiative spans a lot of different things. I am not a certified teacher. I come from industry. My job before this was in marketing. I studied politics, have my MPA, like all of this stuff. And really, like, I'm kind of a nepo baby. My mom works in HR in the district, so she was the one that told me about the position. So, like, very
That's
lucky for
amazing.
her. But my superintendent was my high school principal, so I feel like I had a couple of ends. It worked. Um, yeah, I think that there's a lot going on and a lot of opinions about education in our community right now. And there's a lot of like angst surrounding education. I think people are concerned about what is happening inside of our schools. They doubt the motivation of our teachers. And so really had to bridge that because I speak a different language than our teachers because I do come from the business world. There's so much edu speak that, especially like if you think about teachers, I went from high school to college, back to high school, they've been in this education sphere. And so it's really hard to um, sometimes communicate the really good things that we're doing in like normal human words. And it's hard to build those bridges because they are so focused on the art of teaching and they do an incredible job. But how do we bring these things out? Um, and so really real world learning is to like validate the things that we're teaching in class. Here's how it applies to the real world. Here is how you're learning a direct application and you can put it on your resume. So for example, with this podcasting project, this is embedded in just a regular English class
Wow.
because of the research process, understanding like bias, especially for our students that are taking a little bit more of a political lean in their podcast, understanding media bias, um, writing their scripts, forming questions, doing the analysis of their podcast episode. the general, like, technical speaking parts of it, um, all of that is just validating, here's how you use your English 3 and 4 in real life. This is what it actually looks like. And so we do a lot of different things, like our freshman math class, algebra, we have double blocked it with a business class. And so they're learning math by running our school store. And so they're creating product and selling it and get to be really hands on with it. We do geometry and construction, which is half geometry, half construction. So they'll have math days and then they'll have build days. And they build product for our community so that they're really understanding angles and shapes instead of it just being like really abstract. We've got a program that we share with Blue Springs School District called Business Accelerator. And it is a half-day program where students just solve problems for businesses. So we have students that are building websites, students that are putting together marketing packages, students that are running fundraisers for nonprofits. They are tackling like empty real estate in the area, working with realtors, either like flying drones through and doing some of the like visual stuff to sell, or bringing light to some like commercial spaces or houses that just haven't sold, trying to come up with creative solutions for that. And there we're able to embed credit into those projects. So English, business, and either science or social studies, like the psychology of sales and the psychology of consumers, it's really like that's really intuitive and easy to embed, and there's such practical application. And then we have a full day program, kind of like Business Accelerator, called Fort Connect, that is for our alternative students. So when we say we want every student to graduate with something on their resume, we mean it. And we're kind of
Right.
the only ones that have something specific for our alternative students. So think kids with anxiety, or maybe our students that have become parents, um,
Mm.
or our students that maybe life happened and they've missed a lot of learning and they're just behind on credits. Now, when they get to high school, we can really like tailor education to them, help them catch up or help them fill in whatever gaps that they have, so that they're like ready to go with whatever it is. If it is college, which some of them are, Gucci. If it's not, here is something to put on your resume so that you can talk about it in an interview and maybe get into a career rather than just an entry level retailer food service job. And we also have an amazing internship program. We do 160 internships a year, juniors and
Right.
seniors. Uh, what I think is really cool about it is that we don't gatekeep. So it doesn't matter your GPA or your attendance, or if you have made some naughty decisions. I don't care because every student needs this. Maybe you made naughty decisions because you hate school. That's fine.
Yep.
Like let's learn through like hands-on workplace experiences, or maybe you are super like dead set on going into the medical field. You're going to go to college. You're going to do the accelerated UMKC pre-med program. Great. Can we get you into a hospital so that we know that you want to do that before you get into student debt? It's for
Right.
everyone. And so that's been great. And then we have a career technical education center on our campus. It's called the Career Technology Center. And we've got 19 programs through that as well that are hands on. So students are graduating with a credential. So think like they're graduating with their CNA,
Yep.
or they are getting their firefighter 1 and EMT certs, or they're like crazy OSHA 20, safe serve with culinary. Um, and we run a coffee shop through our entrepreneurial studies program. So check out Campus Grounds if you want some
Yeah,
roastery coffee out of
I
Northeast
did.
Jackson County.
I did. I went. I got that
Yeah.
voucher that day and went and
Hmm.
visited. I can't remember the gal who ran it, but it was awesome. Like the
Hmm.
decor, like the parking, its proximity to the school, it being off the main road, like
Hmm.
everything about it was great. You just unpacked a lot of awesome stuff there, and I'm wrestling with which question I ask you next, but I want to start with, so you've been in this role for 8 years, so
Hmm.
you have now seen probably the fruits of the investment that you've made in these students. And so, What are some of the big learnings and the wins that you've seen as students have graduated from the school having this like full toolkit? Can you give us any examples of where the real world
Mhm,
learning initiative has like really helped people accelerate out in real life?
mhm. Um, the exciting wins for me are when students graduate with confidence, knowing what's next. And I really don't care what's next. I don't care if a student wants to go straight into the workforce or wants to join the military or wants to pursue a PhD program. I truly don't care. I just want them to be confident and know that they can do it. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where our students don't have the same grit as maybe they used to. I want them to know that when they encounter a barrier, they can overcome it and they know how to figure it out because we've stretched them and we've put them in these kind of like awkward scenarios where they have to figure it out. So, interacting with Michael coming to the high school, who is a stranger that they don't see every day, so they're shy, and then having to put forth their voices and opinions on social media, that's also a little bit scary. Like, yeah,
Yes.
we want to make them uncomfortable so that they know they can do it. I want them to be able to know that they can crash and burn where it's safe so that we can build back up, and they can accomplish whatever it is. So, I have a lot of students that are making way more money than me, already. Like, I've got a student that is working at the ammunition plant. He's an HVAC tech. He now has a company car, he has company gas, and he's making 6 figures, and he's, like, 10 years younger than me. Rude, but okay. Like, proud of you. We've got students that, are, in some, like, pretty critical jobs in the military, because they got hands-on with technical skills like welding and HVAC. Now they're doing
Yeah.
secret stuff with nuclear weapons, or like underwater welding. We have someone that's in the Navy for underwater welding. We've got students that the pre dental program at UMKC is really, really hard to get into. Every single one of our students that interned with a dentist or an orthodontist that wanted to go into that program has gotten in, which is also
It's
another huge
unreal.
win because it's so hard to get into because this is kind of like the preeminent dental school in the area. So just like a little bit extra to set our kids apart. We're not a Title I school district, but I think if everyone filled out the free and reduced lunch paperwork, we would be. So we've got a lot of poverty. We've got a lot of just we have a transient population. There's a lot of trauma and heartache in our community, and so there's a lot that we have to overcome.
Mm.
And they are. And I don't think we have to read the crucible to do it. I think we can produce a podcast and prove it.
That is so awesome.
Yeah.
My gosh. What are some of the your favorite podcasts that you've seen come out of student projects? What type of topics do you enjoy?
Hmm.
How does this fill your cup basically? Because we know that you're passionate about this, you're
Hmm.
enthusiastic. Your the reward is seeing these kids grow. What are some really interesting podcasts? And are there students that have continued to podcast? Did anybody find their love for podcasting and
Hmm.
figure something out and make it work? So just on the subject of the
Hmm.
podcasts and how that's continued to flourish.
Yeah, Brady, who is one of the students that stayed back to talk to you.
Yeah,
So he was also in that business accelerator program. And so his project that he really focused on was how can he keep podcasting with his friends when they're all spread out all over the country for college and
right,
have that podcast make money, which I think is really cool. It's a gaming podcast. It's
right.
Sunday morning arcade, Tuesday morning arcade. I should have looked this up before we started,
I
but
remember Morning Arcade was part of it. Yeah, and he
yeah.
told me about the streaming that they did,
Hmm.
and those channels are huge too. Sorry,
Uh-huh.
didn't want to interrupt, but yes, I
No,
remember talking to him about that.
I think it's so great that they're turning this into a side hustle while they pursue their other dreams, but they're not giving up on their, like, hobby and their interest.
Right.
It's not necessarily topics that get to me, it's the specific students behind them when they're really shy or when they're really anxious or when they're my office is in our counseling department, so when there's some of our, like, frequent flyers that I know just, like, life is falling apart, and seeing them produce this really cool thing. Especially, if they suffer from poor mental health, they've got a lot of anxiety. It's scary to put yourself out there. It really is. And they do it. And I'm so proud of them. Yeah, that's my favorite part. I really don't care the topic. They can talk about whatever. Just seeing them like start it and finish it and do it well is what I'm excited about.
Absolutely.
Mhm,
Just curious too, like gosh, that when you were talking about the math, combining math with business and geometry with construction,
mhm,
you said you had the fact that this podcasting course material is part of English 3 and 4.
mhm,
That I feel like that's the turn that we need for
mhm,
education, and especially like in public education, because I think what happened, like, back in the day when you and I were students was like, it was always seen as the college degree was the ticket, right? Get a degree, get a degree, get your degree, and then you'll make money. It almost rhymes, right? And the angst came from the fact that, students would go pursue, like, say, something in IT or software engineering or whatever, or they'd go for, masters in public administration or political science, and then they're finding a shortage of opportunities where hiring managers are dismissing people because of their degrees. And I say this from my own deep personal trauma of pursuing my criminal justice degree. And now I'm in a completely different field and I've been discounted because of the course of study that I took. And we still had that sort of definition of like, whatever you studied in college, like that's who you are, that's your identity. And so I think the battle cry of, my generation as well was like, how do we figure this out sooner? And so public
mhm.
schools were sort of classified as this place where you just learned a bunch of stuff like math and reading and you don't know why you're doing it, and you learn social studies, and then what about the real world? And you have found that way to start making that introduction sooner, because we know too, I've been a hiring manager, my wife is a hiring manager as well. We all know what it's like if we've ever hired people or hired people at a younger age, where we're like, wow, they've got the personality for the role. They've got some of the things you can't teach people, but they don't meet any of the qualifications for this job. And we've found ways to get those folks into other roles so they can grow. But the fact that this introduction is being made sooner
Mhm.
in their development, when you have them 40 hours a week, right? 40 hours or more, because some of them do, you know, they do extracurricular activities like sports, or I'm sure with that technical center, there's times where they're doing welding after hours. They're doing auto shop after hours. So the fact that you're finding a way to do that earlier, I just think that's incredible. Have you been consulted by any other school districts, or like, are there any conferences that you go to kind of spread the message? And how are you guys marketing this program to encourage others to be a part of it as well?
Yeah, this is something that is taking part in, I think, every school district or almost every school district in the Kansas City area, because the Kauffman Foundation provided some like amazing catalytic funding to be able to hire someone. Most school districts used it initially to hire a person to completely focus on it.
Right.
Um, so it is happening in a lot of places. I think, right, we hear on the news that students aren't engaged or they're really struggling with school. This is a way that they're getting engaged and they're being hands on. And so I think as long as teachers are brave enough to try something, they'll be rewarded. And it's that, like, our teachers are used to having all of the answers and knowing all of the things. Because they have to like focus in, especially in high school, on a specific content area. You get certified by content area. So it's not
Right.
just being able to teach fifth grade. You have to take a specific test in order to teach biology. And so they become masters of their content knowledge. So it's also really scary for them when I come to their classroom saying, "Hey, I've got a crazy idea. Are you willing to try it?" So it really takes them being brave, and I'm really impressed with how many of them have stretched outside of their boundaries because they're also practicing what they preach and students are seeing that. They know when their teachers are trying something hard. And I think that's really incredible. So almost every school district in Kansas City is doing this. And it's starting to move for sure in other places in Missouri, like the Ozarks, the Southern Missouri, they have a consortium. They are moving to start real world learning. There's a lot in St. Louis through the CAPS network. It's kind of like our career technical center, where it's some of those trade programs. CAPS is for professional studies. So there is one in the Northland and one south in Blue Valley, I think, Blue Valley on the Kansas side. Northern Missouri has come to visit. And then in Kansas, they actually changed how they are measuring school success. They have a work based learning manual. And so in Kansas, every student has to graduate with something like this. So it is getting there. It's just, it takes a long time to make change in education because you're planning in school year increments. You can't just
Right.
decide quarter one, this is what we're going to do quarter two, especially with the way that we're measured on state testing. Like the worst thing ever to happen to education. Um, we have to like be really careful and intentional with systemic change like this.
Right.
So we're lucky that we got to move really fast because our school board and our superintendent were behind it. But other schools, like, you just have to be intentional with your choices so that it does matter. And I totally agree with you when you were talking about your workplace trauma. My
Yeah.
internship in the state capitol and the state legislature was my second semester of my senior year of college, and I hated it. I hated it so much. And I had already like finished my degree. Um, so I am really passionate about students getting an experience before they go and do anything, like just try it out for a second so that they're making like well-reasoned choices because I'm great at talking. I love politics. Arguing is like a hobby of mine, but actually like doing it day in and day out sucked so much. So
Right.
like I'm lucky that I fell into this job. Again, a little bit of nepotism, right? But I'm lucky that I found this, and I don't want people to just have to rely on luck or to have like a second start in life. Can we leave with some direction?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, you're 8 years in, so, the nepotism thing, I mean, is irrelevant at this point. You have more than doubled and tripled your
Yeah.
value, as a force multiplier in your role. Like, I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, my kids, my
Mhm,
daughters are 9 and 6 years old, and I am so grateful that I've met folks like you and others on this podcast who have kind of given me cheat codes for how
mhm,
to raise my kids, right? Like I've talked a lot recently about how, my girls are now, this is a new development since I visited the school, but they're doing jujitsu with me. And so daddy daughter,
mhm,
fight time is a real thing. And so there's a lot of lessons that I'm able to do here, but I keep thinking about the parents, and I know too, coming from a rough environment, rough background like myself, I think, my parents, I think they did the best with what they had, and there's a
mhm,
lot of awesome things that they taught me when I was younger, and there's things and there's resources that I wish they would have had too to equip them, right? And so I'm thinking about kids that are coming into the school, right? Students that are coming in and they've got a lot falling apart at home. Like they've got stuff like, family members dying, they've got parents with terminal illnesses. There's all sorts of matter of things, and so I keep thinking about the parents and how they support their students, when they're pursuing things like, the podcasting program, or they're going to the technical center. Like, what input have you gotten from some parents on how to help the student at home, because that's huge too, right? Like finding a way to invest in them when they're at home and help equip them for these programs. um what has that dynamic been like with you and the parents in the school
mhm.
district?
I do think that's still an area that we have to grow in, but not any fault to the parents. We have a lot of families that the breadwinner works second shift, which means they
Yep.
leave when a student's at school and come home when the student's in bed. We have a lot of poverty in our area, and so you just have to hustle. And so what that's meant is that we have to build trust with our community because we're doing a lot of the like developing of their child.
Yeah.
And so I do think that our community is completely bought it into real world learning. Um, this is something that they're so excited about because it's been really good for their students. And it's something that we have to be really intentional about, that we're not putting barriers up because there are already enough barriers in their lives.
Right.
Like we when we first started this initiative, that first year that I was hired under the grant, before I was rolled over into an employee, we traveled across the country to look at different school districts and different programs. And I think the thing that we learned the most was that it is easy to put your high flyers and give them these opportunities because you know that they're going to do really well. What's hard is taking your students that have traditionally struggled and saying, try it. Like, let's see what happens. Um, and I think that pursuing equity in that way has also been another reason why our parents have bought in, because they might know that their students struggle with literacy or have always struggled in math, or just isn't confident with school. But we are finding ways to show them that they can, and that's been really powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. How
Hmm.
many people are just never given an opportunity or a chance, right,
Hmm.
to prove themselves wrong or
Hmm.
prove others wrong, and you've talked about that as well, just what students think is possible versus what is actually possible.
Hmm.
Right. And so you already mentioned too some barriers that have been overcome, like people who are they're just very shy, or maybe they're introverted,
Hmm.
actually practicing speaking. And for me, for example, that's been very powerful. I think I told the students this when I was there, but I am a ambivert, right? So I'm not an extrovert, I'm not an introvert. People automatically classify me as an extrovert because I'm sitting here, I'm making eye contact with you right now, I'm talking, I could speak in front of groups, but I told everybody that it's like a light switch, and it causes a power drain on me, and I've got to switch it off. And so when I discovered that I could leverage some of the techniques of public speaking for a time, as long as I got to recharge, like that was great. But I couldn't have learned that if I just continued to stay off social media, say,
Hmm.
no, I don't need a podcast. No one wants to hear me talk. If I, all these other self degrading thoughts that I struggled with before I got to do this. But that breakthrough is available for everybody if they're just given that opportunity to try,
Hmm.
and not just try, but having that support. And I love, like, that session that we did too. What I noticed was all of the teachers and adults in the room kind of making that outer circle, kind of like, looking at certain students, and I saw a couple go, like, it was almost like they're saying, see, like, that's
Hmm.
what we were talking about, and just that support, like knowing that this just isn't something that teachers sent their students off to attend, but they were attending as well,
Hmm.
showing that they're showing up as well, and doing that. Um, it's just incredible, like, absolutely incredible what's happening there. Um, Something else that we had talked about previously was talking about making those quick decisions. And you've already said too, like, public education is typically slow,
Hmm.
but what has been your way or your methodology of pivoting quickly? And what are maybe some experiments that you tried that, like, you just found through, the data, what happened in the school district or with students and their projects maybe didn't work? Like, what are some of
Hmm.
your lessons learned, and how did you adapt to some of those things?
Hmm. Um, we definitely, because school does move so slowly, we do have to be aware of the sunk cost fallacy. So, for
What's
instance,
that?
we put, so like you have spent all of this time and money in something, so you're just going to continue to do it because you put all of
Oh,
that effort in instead of saying, like, no, it didn't work. Like, let's move on. So we had a class that we tried to do. It sounds like a really good idea, but it crashed and burned, where it was a project lead the way biomedical science class. So these are your kids that are really interested in health science. We double blocked that with an English so that we could get more like sciency English, thinking that that would be really interesting to those students. But what happened was the students are also really highly involved and trying to double block something. We were running up against band, choir, debate, um, s- student council, all the things that they like to do, all of the extras that help them grow as humans. And so we tried it for a year, and we bought we had our paid our teachers to come up with curriculum, and we bought all sorts of new books. And they spent a lot of time doing this, and it didn't work. It didn't work. So we just decided to nix it and let's try something else. Um, and that I think is unique. I also, because I'm not a teacher, I think I've got a really good wing it muscle. Like, I know I can figure it out. I will get 80% of the way there and I know I can figure it out. Um, and so working with teachers, I'll come in on their plan time and they'll tell me like, this didn't work. Like, that's okay. Let's try this. Let's try that together. Is something that's really important to to be able to like pivot and turn quickly. So, for example, we had a client that I have fired, and actually, it was a nonprofit that has since gone under, so it should have probably been red flags when we were working with them. But
Sure.
they kept asking for more and more deliverables out of the student, like beyond the scope of work. So, essentially, what it was is kind of like the genesis of the podcast project. Actually, students had to look for an issue in public education, and then they ended up presenting at a conference about what the solution they wanted to be. And then it turned into we had to record promos about it. And then we had to like give them use of our stage so that they could just pre-record the whole presentation.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
like I was driving equipment back and forth downtown to our school because they were working with a bunch of different school districts and we only had 24 hours that we could use their fancy cameras and mics. And it just like more and more and more, they wanted our students to create marketing. And it was outside of the original scope of work because every project that we do takes 9 times longer than it would, with a career professional because they don't know. There's so much that they just don't know how to do.
Right.
Like, when we talk about doing a marketing project for a nonprofit or for a small business, they can't just whip it up. They have to learn how to use Canva and learn how to use Adobe and really think intentionally about how they're using TikTok. And that just takes time. And we like to bring in guests like you that are experts in it to tell us how to do it because we also don't know. We're learning right alongside them. And so um, we really have to be reflective while we're doing these and quick. So, for instance, with the podcast, we were using some like in house people, and it just, we could get better. So, stalking people on LinkedIn and searching like Kansas City podcasters and asking a lot
Yeah.
of people to come. And then we learned some things with you about how to just, you have a different communication style than some of the other people that we brought in, which was excellent. I think
Appreciate
you
that.
riff a lot more. The
I do.
podcasters I had brought in previously are like very scripted. And so we just had to be a little bit more flexible with our students. Maybe they don't need to storyboard out every single thing and
Right.
interview their
Right.
guests twice so they know what they're going to say. So then they can practice follow up questions like,
Whew.
just wing it and try. So it changed timing of the project. It changed, like, our teachers just had to add in a little bit more because the project ended sooner because we didn't do everything twice. We just did it once and it's okay. So
Right.
you just have to be brave enough to say, this is working, this isn't working. What can I do to fix it?
Absolutely. No, and I love how you mentioned too the scope of the agreement when you
Mhm,
had students interning with this nonprofit. The other part of the learning curve too for the students is, yeah, they have to learn all the technical stuff. You talked about Canva, how to write copy, doing the TikTok videos, but it's also teaching them the art of how to get outside of their own head and then get
mhm,
into the mindset of that business and this ability. They're interns, but they're also like they're consultants, right?
mhm,
They're like,
mhm,
hey, business owner, nonprofit leader, you want me to execute your marketing stuff. Tell me about your company. Tell me about your nonprofit.
mhm,
Tell me
mhm,
about your audience. Tell me about the people that you want engaging with your nonprofit or your business, and tell me about the prototype of maybe folks that you've learned just aren't fit for the business, right? So they're
mhm,
having to do that mindset shift as well to think, I remember, for example, like when I first was thinking about this podcast, I was like, okay, what do I want? What do I want it to look like, And then as I started finding out who my listeners were, I started adapting from there. So there's this mindset of in learning in business, if you go into the professional career field, right? Like you have to learn how to put yourself in other people's uh noggins and
mhm.
figure out what's going to work. And that is a very awkward, very challenging um, thing to learn,
Mhm.
especially when, how many students came to the program having already done
Right.
podcasts, right?
Right,
How
right.
many came already being an intern, right?
Mhm.
Like they're there with you and you are teaching them at their level, most of the time from the ground up. You're like, hey, here's the foundation of this internship. But the way you
Mhm.
talked about the scope, that is super important because that is also teaching the students how to keep boundaries, which are
Mhm.
so important, right?
Mhm.
Boundaries are like the source of, peace of mind, uh, you know, uh, expectation management, relationship, trust, all of that. And so teaching people how to know where the scope ends, where it begins, and where maybe we need to reevaluate. But when you're setting up these internships, are you helping with the scoping of those, or do you have a career coordinator? What's that whole process look like? I'm just very curious as to how you find these businesses and
Mhm.
nonprofits, because we've had a lot of people on this show that run nonprofits and businesses,
Yeah.
and so, if there's a business owner, let me just leave there because I riff.
Mhm.
I ask four questions in one. For the business owners listening, like how can they engage with your program, or what is something that they need to know, and how do you set that up as a school district? Yeah, what does that partnership look like when you're sort of planning it out?
Mhm. It is really whatever the business owner is interested in. So I'm involved
Mm,
in a couple of chambers of commerce. My district is so generous to
right.
pay for all of these luncheons that I go to, and a part of Independence Junior Service League and just different organizations to meet people. Um, I work backwards, so I don't necessarily want to collect a lot of projects and create this database that a student can go to. I like to
Love that.
wait to see what a student or a teacher is interested in, and because I already have relationships with the people, I know who to ask if we can try this. And if not, I will cold call or send you a message on LinkedIn, see if you'll come. Um,
That's right.
yeah, but so if a business owner is interested in working with students, it's really just where your capacity is at. Do you have time to mentor a student 4 days a week for a semester? Because if so, then will work with you to talk about what that internship could look like based off of what you need, because we want it more than copies and coffee. But can they shadow and see all of the things that you're doing? We're lucky we have two internship facilitators. So after I can build the relationship and introduce them to the facilitator, they handle the day to day. If that is overwhelming, the amount of time, do you have something on your to do list that's maybe six, seven, eight? Like it's not mission critical, but it would make your life or your business run so much easier. That's something that my students can tackle. So it's not gonna hurt your business if it crashes and burns, but it could help if we're successful. And regardless, you're going to get your Gen Z, Gen Alpha, who will be your users and your consumers in the future. You're gonna get their ideas and their thoughts about your business. So even without that, you're gonna know how to iterate for this upcoming generation. And really, when it comes to those projects, do you have 6 or 8 hours throughout the semester to donate and work with students? Pitch us your problem. Um, they'll work on it and then they'll do a mid project check in. Hey, are we on the right path? What do you like? What do you dislike? They'll fix it and then they'll give you the final product. Um, they'll do a lot of research and we like to make it easy for the business partner too by getting subject matter experts who might know the industry. So if we're working on a marketing project for community services lead, we're talking about their uh, programs that they do for the community. Maybe I'll bring in my friend Dixie from Small Biz Social to teach my students just one time how to do marketing, social media marketing from her perspective. So it's not all of the time talking to that business owner. So it's not taking up a ton of their time. And it's more practice and more strangers for my students to interact with. Um,
Absolutely.
we do a design thinking model. So shout out to Seedfold Partners. They have done a lot of teaching of our teachers and our staff how, like the model for how to solve problems. So it starts with
Mm,
a lot of empathy work. You do research with your business. What do the users think of it? So not just the business owner, but what about their customers? And you'll iterate and you'll have some ideas and you'll prototype and then go back to the drawing board to adjust and refine until you finally have your final product. And so it's a cycle, but you can keep going over and over and over when it keeps coming to those solutions. And so it's never like I started something and it failed and I'm done. Like, let's try again. Let's do a little bit more research and see what we can come up with. And so that's also where the projects take 1,000 years because they have to keep going back and refining and trying. Um, but I try and keep it as easy and low stakes for a business partner as possible because time is money, and we just have to make sure that we're not like bleeding you dry because you're also giving us an incredible resource in your partnership. Um, so I
Absolutely.
want it to like be mutually beneficial. Um, and then if like a project is too much, will you come in and be a guest speaker one time? Maybe you'll be the subject matter expert on someone else's project. So it's just a day
Right.
that you might donate. Um, and hopefully like we grow together.
Yeah, I'm seeing so much value in this because, there are so many small businesses that
Mhm,
have so much potential, but they are so afraid to add to their numbers.
mhm,
A lot of people, and this is even in the professional workforce, like when people get into leadership roles, like they struggle to teach what they were really good at. Probably the reason they were promoted into a leadership role is because they're really good at the job, but like trusting others with
mhm,
now I need to trust you with taking over this part of the business. And so the fact that you're also providing a sort of incubator for small business owners to see how, they would hire their next future full-time employee, or
mhm,
the person that might take their job, that they want to take their job one day so they can run strategy for the company. And it's so amazing how mutual this whole thing is. Like, it is providing so much opportunity, connecting the students and businesses, developing all these skills. Like, this actually is the answer for how to build the skills that we all say you can't teach people to have. I'm guilty of saying that, and I'm starting to realize the error of my ways, where my in my full-time role, like my director and I, we were recently running an internal recruitment, and
mhm,
there were some people that we hired, or that we interviewed, and we were saying like, man, this person's got all the things you can't teach people how to have, like how to have grace, and how to just be a good human, kind of thing. But
mhm,
I'm starting to realize that you do develop those skills when you actually create opportunities. You can teach people you can teach people to, have integrity and have honesty and transparency. And you can absolutely teach people to learn that failure is okay. And the faster actually you fail and rapidly prototype good ideas that are worth having, the more value you're going to add in any place you go. And I love how you're bringing that to the school district, like just that inspiration of like, hey, we won't know if we won't try. Like, let's just try it. If it doesn't work, worst thing that can happen is we just adapt our approach, right? Like, adapt,
mhm.
adopt, abandon it, right? So I just this is incredible. This has been an amazing conversation, Dylan. You covered so much ground in your in your responses, the way you describe it. I could tell that you are definitely comfortable speaking about the program, speaking about your own experience. Was there anything that we didn't discuss or that you want to leave our listeners with, and folks that you invite to listen to this episode as well? Like, is there something that people need to know that you don't typically get the opportunity to maybe say on a platform? I would love for people to hear those things.
Yeah, 2 things.
Two
Failure
things.
is not a bad thing. It is okay to fail. It really is okay to fail. As long as you know that it's a learning opportunity. I think so often we get hamstrung at barriers and we don't continue, and they really are okay. They're going to make you a more adaptable and a more confident and a stronger person. So I just especially if maybe other school districts are listening, it is okay when things crash and burn, honestly, because you're going to learn more and you're going to become a better human through it. Um, it's hard, like you were talking about, Michael, when you were with your director. It's hard when you're in a business environment to let failure happen because it
Yeah.
does affect the bottom line and it does affect like the critical moves you need to make. But it is still okay if it happens. It really is because that is where you're gonna learn the best. If you're always good at the things that you always do, you're never gonna expand. You're just gonna keep doing those things. So that's the first thing. And the second thing that I wanna say is our young people are incredible. They are smart and they are ambitious and they've got the hustle that I think our generation doesn't really have because it was a lot easier for us. Um, they can do it. And so please take a chance on our kids because they are worth it and they're going to make mistakes. But again, failure's okay, right? They can and they will succeed. And I'm so excited to see what our world's going to look like in 10, 15 years because they're so, so good. So please take a chance on our kids.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I knew I needed to keep the tissues handy. I actually realized recently I had a previous guest, my last guest, Daniel Davis, like shared his story, and I've talked to him since, and I told him
Mhm.
I killed a box of tissues on his episode. And today, as I was preparing for this, I was like, okay, water, check, microphone, all that stuff. But I could not agree with you more on giving the kids a chance. And I remember what it was like, being younger, starting to see how generations sort of judged and fought each
Mhm.
other. And this is your fault and that fault. And it's crazy how people love to do that. And I think it was Simon Sinek in his expanded version of Leaders Eat Last. He actually broke down all the value. And at the time that he wrote the book, I think he was talking about millennials.
Mhm.
But everyone is growing up with different challenges that previous generations didn't have. And I understand sort of the binary worldviews that often clash of like, well, stuff I had to deal with was this, and your generation doesn't have to deal with that. It's a lot easier. And they're like, yeah, but I'm working through my, like, for example, my entire life being cataloged on social media. From the time I was born, there's pictures of me out there all the way up to like now. Like there's different challenges that we're all working through. And to just like everybody understand that like you can either take that viewpoint where you're looking at the strengths of every generation, or you're blaming generations, or you can say I've got this one life to live. How can I invest in all these folks that are coming up right now, and how can I use what I've learned in a way that is empowering, and
Mhm.
not using shame and all those sorts of things to do that. And that's something my wife and I, we constantly are looking at too with my daughters, having those tough conversations about, when do certain levels of technology come in, and we
Mhm.
don't know what school they're going to go to right now. Just certain things like that. It's so powerful. So
Mhm.
not like you needed any additional commentary to what you said. What you've said in this podcast has been so powerful. One of my favorite talks that I've done. This is incredible. I love everything that you and the folks at Fort Osage are doing. Dylan, it has been so cool having you on the show.
Thank you so much, Michael. This is a great opportunity.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. So we'll have Dylan's contact information. But Dylan, do you want to maybe sign us out with best ways to get in touch with you? Because I know you're on LinkedIn, all that. But how would you prefer folks get in touch with Fort Osage and you with the program if they have questions, or they want to learn more?
Yeah, probably email is the best because I'm bebopping around to different schools and different businesses, but I check it very regularly. So it's dypeterson at Fort Osage, FORTOSAGE.net. dypeterson at fortosage.net.
Okay, awesome. I will make sure I put that in the show notes as
Perfect.
well. All right, Dylan. Thank you so much again. And
Thank
everybody,
you.
thank you for checking in on this episode. Please like, share, subscribe, do all the things you know to do, spread the good word, and we'll see you next time.